Hello, everyone. Welcome to another FIGT webinar. We are so happy to have you join us today. I'm Kate Brubaker, the FIGT webinar coordinator, founder of smallplanetstudio.com, and your host for today. And I am so delighted to welcome Sue Elson today as our speaker. Sue is going to talk about how to maximize your career or business opportunities on LinkedIn. And I think this is something that we are all going to get a lot of really practical tips from. So I'm going to let Sue take it from here so she can introduce herself more in depth. Welcome, Sue.
Hi, Kate, and thanks for the opportunity. It's lovely to be on a Families in Global Transition webinar, and particularly as I'm an Australian from the bottom end of the world, it's nice that we can share our knowledge worldwide and be a part of the team. All right, so how to maximize your career or business opportunities on LinkedIn is the focus of this presentation. And just to give you a bit of background, obviously you can read the screen to look at it, but I guess the main things that are of importance to listeners today are the fact that I grew up in Adelaide in South Australia and moved to Melbourne in Victoria in Australia in 1994. And that coincided with a complete change in career, finding out that I was pregnant, getting stacked, becoming a mother, and adjusting to life here in Melbourne. And it's classified as one of the world's most livable cities, but when all of that happens to you all at once, it can be very challenging. And I'm the eldest of 27 grandchildren and had a real identity in Adelaide. And I come to Melbourne and everybody's wearing black and it's freezing cold weather. And I found the transition difficult, but I'm so grateful that I moved because it helped me set up newcomersnetwork.com, which is a website I created in 2001. I joined LinkedIn in 2003. I'm one of the first 80,000 people in the world on LinkedIn. And then I've been consulting on the topic of LinkedIn since 2008. And last year, believe it or not, I published 3 books, 3 80,000 word books in less than 8 months. So that was a huge year for me. And now I'm getting back into the world of work and so on. But another really important aspect, and I know that a lot of expatriates and people who travel the world do a lot of voluntary work. And there's a huge amount of voluntary work that I've done, which has really been a great accessory to my career, but also in times when I couldn't actually secure full-time work because I had family responsibilities and I chose to spend time with my children. But my voluntary work kept up my level of professional skills as well as intellectual brain food, because obviously as much as we all love our children, they're not stimulating 24 hours a day, and I love the academic stuff that I do. So some of those voluntary roles have been fantastic at doing that, and I still do a lot of voluntary work to this day. But in terms of what is LinkedIn all about, well, first of all, it started off in the living room of co-founder Reid Hoffman in 2002 and was launched on the 5th of May 2003. And it's one of the world's largest professional networks, over 500 million members in over 200 countries. And some of the people, the groups that are expanding the highest rate are students, because you can be as young as 13 to join LinkedIn, and people in China. So there's a huge number of people in China. They've created WeChat functionality as well. So that's really interesting about how it's expanding into additional major population countries. Their mission is to connect the world's professionals and make them more productive and successful, and they make money in a lot of different ways. So I will say up front, first of all, I'm not paid by LinkedIn, and also I still am on the free account, so I don't actually pay for a premium subscription, but I give loads of value to the platform, so I don't feel guilty about it. But there's people who do pay for premium memberships, people who pay for advertising, talent solutions with LinkedIn Recruiter, many thousands of dollars a year that most recruiters need to pay for, and all sorts of other ways that they attract funds. So it's a really interesting business model. They've also acquired Pulse, which is a newsfeed service, SlideShare, which is where you can put your PowerPoint presentations online, lynda.com, which is an online training course provider. So if you do have premium, you do get access to those online courses. And even Connectify, which is something I predicted they would purchase. That is an online platform that you can use in your internet browser. So if somebody Googles my name, Sue Elson, what Connectify will do is bring up all of my online profiles on the one screen. So again, that can be very useful for people doing due diligence. So they haven't integrated that within the platform yet, but it is an acquisition that they've made. And then last year, in one of the biggest corporate takeovers in history, Microsoft purchased LinkedIn. And I think that's going to be a real game changer in the future. And I think the Microsoft Dynamics database product will actually compete with Salesforce. And that's my prediction, so who knows whether it will happen or not. But originally they started off as a network and they've moved over into publishing, and they've done a lot of updates recently. So the mobile version of LinkedIn has been upgraded, and the desktop or laptop version has been upgraded as well. And that is now designed to be more like the mobile experience. And I believe their main reason for doing that is to encourage people to spend a little bit longer on LinkedIn, as we do with Facebook. So instead of just checking out all your friends and family's photos and pictures, you can actually go to LinkedIn, and the topics you're most interested in can appear in your news feed. So I see that as another prediction. But if you want to follow what they're doing, you're welcome to check out that link with their news releases as well. Now, there's a lot of reasons why I believe everyone should be on LinkedIn, including my children, and they are. And it's often quoted, well, particularly here in Australia, as second to Facebook in terms of saturation in the local market. So here in Australia, we've only got about 24 million people, which is not that many considering the size of our landmass, but about 14 million have Facebook accounts, and about 8 million have LinkedIn accounts. So, you know, that's a fairly high proportion of people with profiles. You're actually 14 times more likely to be viewed on LinkedIn if you have a photograph. So if you're actually looking for a new career or business opportunity, I really encourage you to have a photo on there. Up to 20% of the viewing time will be spent looking at the photograph, even more if it's a bad photo, but hopefully less so that they can go straight onto your content. You're 7 times more likely to be viewed if your profile has been completed. And unfortunately, what I see is a lot of very senior people with very sparse LinkedIn profiles, and they're really doing themselves a disservice. And I know that in some cultures, it feels uncomfortable to put a lot of content online, but you need to remember that it's just a dumb, stupid database. And if you don't put the information in, then you can't be found online. And I often quote a little story about when I was on a dating website, and I put in that I'm not interested in anyone who drinks, gambles, goes to the horse racing or whatever. And it was really interesting because then all of these profiles of people who liked horse racing and gambling started coming to me. So the database obviously only recognised the words horse racing, gambling. They didn't recognise not. And so, you know, the same thing applies with LinkedIn. If you want to be known as a graphic designer or a relocation consultant or whatever it is, then you need to have those words on your LinkedIn profile. And the way you can demonstrate that brand is, again, through your photographs. So I had one lady who was a lawyer who wanted to become involved in the arts, and she was extremely private, and her photograph actually has her with her sunglasses on, her hair across her face, and on an angle shot with art in the background. And that's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be sort of some stereotypical photograph, but it has to sort of reflect what you're aiming for. But your headline, which is the words directly underneath your name, that really needs to have those keywords in it. Extremely important. Please do not put seeking opportunities or, I don't know, looking for contract or something like that. It just doesn't look good at all. And then the summary is a little bit further down, and it's the top 2 lines, which in the new interface that LinkedIn has, it used to show in full, but now it doesn't. So you've really got to make those top 2 lines really cut to the chase and explain to people what you want them to do when they look at your LinkedIn profile. I also don't believe that there is any such thing called job security. And obviously, as an expatriate or a globally mobile professional, it's very easy to think that it's less secure for you than for somebody who lives in a country all their lives. And in some respects, yes, but in other respects, no, because if you've got a really good network and you mention to that network that, well, you're going to be moving to Singapore, then you can let people know, and then you can get referrals. and get an opportunity when you get to Singapore, or even before you get to Singapore. And I've heard of plenty of people get jobs in Melbourne via a connection they have in London or something like that. So, you know, the world is connected, and referrals is what it's about. So if you've built up that network over the years, you'll quite often find that if you reach out to them, they'll know someone in the region that you're looking for, or they can refer you to somebody else. And, you know, that's what's of value, having that network. I also believe it's a pull strategy rather than a push strategy. So rather than me constantly explaining this is what I do, I put the content there so I attract those opportunities directly to me. And if you do want to be contacted, please put your email address at least in your summary section as well, because that way, if people are not actually connected to you, they can still reach out to you directly. There's lots of other reasons. It's a word of mouth referral verification tool. So you could be at an expatriate event and you know, give away your name. Somebody can sneak off to the bathroom and Google you, and guess what? You know, your LinkedIn profile, if you've optimized it, is likely to appear on the first page of Google search results. And this is really interesting because in 2012, I created my own website, sueelson.com, and it actually took 6 months to get that exact match domain name above my LinkedIn profile in Google search results. So, you know, it's really, really well optimized for your name. I also believe it's not what you know or who you know, but who refers you, back to my previous comment about referrals. And the value of your network is, you know, not the security of one major client. I work with a lot of international arrivals and departures from Australia, and it's really interesting that a lot of them still end up working internationally, even though they've moved to Melbourne. And one of my clients was from Belgium, and he moved to Melbourne, then he went to Sydney, and he's actually secured very significant leadership consultancy work from a Belgium-based company, and they found him on LinkedIn. So it's definitely a way to be found. Also, the rate of change of technology, it helps you to keep up to date or be left behind. And those keywords that you have, maybe for your own website, if you have one of those, or for your own business, they can be replicated on your LinkedIn profile. I also believe that it's really important to create a digital footprint, because people will, if they hear about you, Google you. And my digital footprint is quite large because I've been having a website online since 2001. So I've got 16 years worth of content floating around out there. But also another thing that's talked about is the importance of having digital literacy. And there's big campaigns in Australia to encourage all Australians to be competent on computers. But I think, you know, just being digitally literate is not the same as building a digital asset and being competent at using these tools. So a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to get any help with my LinkedIn profile. I can fill in the boxes as easy as anybody else. But are you attracting the right opportunities? You know, that's the question. And I'll definitely be showing you a lot of that today. You also need to think about your own brand and how you're going to manage your own profile and your business profile. And another comment I'd like to make, you know, both males and females quite often don't think about recording their achievements in good enough detail. And I get very anxious about that, because if somebody meets you, they get a real sense of who you are. But if they're meeting you online, they only get to see what's on the screen. And if you don't explain some of those achievements, it's going to be very difficult for them to understand what you can offer. And I don't believe you should say, I'm the greatest salesperson that ever lived. But if you can say, I've achieved a 25% quarter-on-quarter increase in sales for the last 3 years, then I can say, wow, those numbers really stack up. And I'd like to think that if you did that for that organisation, you could do that for our organisation. So what we're taught in recruitment is that past behaviour is a good predictor of future behaviour. So if you write up those achievements, we have a sense of who you are as a person. The last point I'll make on this is that 95% of decision makers will Google you before they offer you an opportunity. So it's around 75% before an interview, but 95% before a job offer. and definitely before they actually employ you if you're in consulting or business. And this happened to me recently. A lady attended my first book launch in February last year, and then a friend of hers said, do you know anyone who specialises in LinkedIn? And that was for a patent attorney company here in Melbourne. And this girl said, oh, I know Sue. And so then they obviously checked me out, being lawyers, and then I did the gig yesterday. So there's plenty of these opportunities around, and people want to be able to verify you. And even though I've produced all the content on my LinkedIn profile, for some reason, if people Google it and find it themselves, they believe it. I will be giving you all an opportunity to receive these slides, but when you do, you will obviously be able to click on that link, and it will go into more information about the business case for LinkedIn. Sorry, I just went 2 slides too fast then. Okay, so what are the hang-ups with LinkedIn? As you can imagine, as I've been consulting on the topic of LinkedIn since 2008, a lot of people start telling me about the things they're concerned about. And one of them is privacy. And unlike Facebook, it doesn't describe or encourage you to tell people what you had for breakfast. And I always like to add, and I had porridge for breakfast. The reality is you can choose how much information you wish to disclose. And if you're concerned, particularly if you're in a high profile position, I'd probably suggest you don't include your mobile phone number or cell phone number on your LinkedIn profile, because it connects you up with, disgruntled employees and all sorts of things. So you might want to avoid that. But also you can decide who's going to see your connections. There's a few other things, and I'll show you that when we go into LinkedIn shortly. You also may think, but I don't know who to connect to. I get all these random requests from loads of people I've never, ever met before. And I always say, well, it really depends on your purpose. Now, because I run networks, it's better for me if I'm connected to more people, because then I'll appear in more search results because they're only a second level connection away. And so it's to my advantage to be connected to more people. But if you were, for instance, a cybersecurity specialist working with, the top 500 companies in any particular country, you might say, well, look, I don't want to be connected to anybody unless they're a personal contact of mine and somebody in the cybersecurity industry. So again, really depends on your purpose. Some people say, but it's going to take me too much time. And I say, well, if it's generating the business you want, do a cost-benefit analysis. But that said, I wouldn't recommend more than 20 minutes a day or even a week, really, to be spent on LinkedIn, provided you know what you're doing and you stick to those things. Too costly? Well, as I said earlier, I still use the free account. Some people say, but I can't write. I can write for somebody else's profile, but I can't write for mine. And I would say, well, don't worry about that. Use dot points and focus on using your keywords, because that's what the database will try and find you on. But also bear in mind that a lot of people are going to be looking at your LinkedIn profile on their mobile device. And with that in mind, obviously, if you're just using dot points, it's going to be a lot easier for people to scan the information than if you wrote long sentences that took 5 scrolls to get through a paragraph or something like that. You're scared of computers? Well, you need to show your digital competency in any country, so it's a good way to practice that. Your business rules, if you're part of an organisation, you need to read and make sure that you understand the social media guidelines of the company that you're working for. Some of them can be quite strict in what you're allowed to do on social media whilst you're in a particular position. Again, when I was working with these lawyers yesterday, they wanted to, make particular requests, and I thought, well, that's not really the kosher thing to do. The person's LinkedIn profile is their own, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops in the future. But if there are social media guidelines, please make sure you've read them and understand them. And also, if you need help, well, for goodness sake, don't wait. Ask for a friend. Get an expert to help you. There's plenty of advice out there. Now, before you update your LinkedIn profile on any of the suggestions that I'm going to recommend today, I actually encourage you to do these things. So firstly, use Google Chrome as your browser, because it doesn't work as well with Internet Explorer. It's terrible. Safari is okay, Firefox is pretty drastic, but Google Chrome seems to work really well, and we'll change the download settings. And it's best if you are clear about what you're trying to achieve and your purpose, but if you're not, please don't put off filling in the details. So you can still put those in, but if you are clear about your purpose, it'll save you a bit more time. You'll also need to prepare a list of primary and secondary keywords, because you're going to be putting those throughout your profile, and I'll show you where I've put my LinkedIn training keywords so that you can see that. I also think it's a good idea for you to record your statistics in a spreadsheet. How many views you've had over the last 90 days, how many connections you've got, how many recommendations or endorsements or followers, because those statistics are real-time statistics only. So if they change, you can't go back and say, what was it on the 1st of January? There's no record unless you make that record yourself. I also recommend that you save a PDF of your profile so that you've got a copy of the content that you've added to your profile. In the unlikely event that LinkedIn crashes or that they delete your profile because you've been naughty on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn will do that. If you spam people, their algorithms are likely to pick that up. So you need to have a backup copy of your profile. And you can also get an archive of your data, which will give you a list of all of the people that you're connected to. So in my case, I have over 11,000 connections, and there is no way I would ever remember all those people. So by doing this archive of my data request every few months, I've always got a backup copy should something go wrong. And I can also use that for other purposes too with my business. I'm also going to suggest you turn off activity broadcasts and add all of your email addresses to your account. Decide who can see your connections. Turn off the viewers of this profile also viewed, because you don't want to be showcasing, your competitors next to your name. And also decide whether or not you're going to be anonymous when viewing profiles. So now is the time for me to go into LinkedIn and show you some of these things. And apologies for anything that pops up on the screen whilst I'm doing this, because obviously this is live, directly on my LinkedIn profile as we speak. Okay, so the very first thing I get super excited about when I visit my LinkedIn profile is looking at who's viewed my profile. And I call this reverse stalking. And I'm quite sure that if you're logged into your LinkedIn account right now, it probably won't have as many views as mine does, but you've got to remember, I've been here a long time and this is what I do. And you can see over here on the left-hand side of the screen, I've had over 1,000 views in the last 90 days. Now, I have a colleague who used to receive over 2,000 views per 90 days, but still not get any work. So just because you've got a huge number of views, it doesn't guarantee you any results. But obviously, if you only have 5 views per 90 days, the chances of you getting some results are less. So I encourage you, if you're currently looking for career or business opportunities, you really need to achieve a result of 100 or more views per 90 days. So if I click on this now, I will be able to see on the free account the last 5 people who've looked at my profile. And unfortunately, I get a lot of people from far off countries trying to sell me website services. And you can see here, I've also got 2 people who looked at me anonymously, and I will not be able to find out who those people were, even if I had a premium account. But what I can also see over here on the left is some of the companies that representatives who've looked at me anonymously have come from. And so it's not completely anonymous. If you make yourself anonymous and you're from a unique named company, it might still show up on the left-hand side of the person's screen that you're looking at, that somebody from your company name has looked at their profile. So say, for instance, you're checking out someone because you're going to be interviewed tomorrow, or they've got a bad debt with your business. You might want to go in anonymous, but you're still not completely anonymous when you do that. So I just want to give that little bit of a warning there. But I love reverse stalking because this gives me some clues as to whether or not my profile is attracting the right sorts of people, whether some of my previous clients are checking me out and doing their homework, so to speak. And it's very informative. So that's one of my favorite things to do on LinkedIn. But for this stage of the process, I just want you to write down that number that was on the screen so that you've got a record and you can aim for something above that in the future. Now, the next thing we'll do is we'll actually just go to my profile, and before I download a copy of my profile, I'll just show you how to change your settings on Google Chrome so it asks where to save the file before downloading. So there's 3 dots on the top right hand side of the screen, and you can choose settings, and then you scroll to the end of that screen and you choose advanced. And then you scroll a bit further, and then you just make sure that this box here, which would have been there probably, is changed over to ask where to save each file before downloading. So instead of everything automatically going to my downloads folder, I now get to choose where things go when I download them. And I have it set like that all the time. So now I can close that tab. And I can go here, and you can actually do this on anybody's LinkedIn profile. When you see those 3 dots to the right of their photo spot, you'll be able to click on that and choose Save to PDF. Now, what it's going to do is ask me where to save it. And I like to always make sure that I put today's date back to front. I'm not sure when you'll be seeing this, but I'll put the date here. And then I put dashes between words because I do a lot of website design, so I put that in as well. And then LinkedIn, so that that word is in the file name so I can find it easily. And then I would normally have a folder in my computer where all my LinkedIn profiles are and save it to theirs. So that way, if I want to, I can now look at the content that was on my LinkedIn profile and have a backup. So if you go in and change all your details around, oh no, I want to go back to what I had previously, you've at least got that copy as a PDF. The other benefit of doing this is you can do it on a competitor's profile or a colleague's profile or something like that, print it out and borrow a few ideas. Why not? Instead of reinventing the wheel, if you've done similar sorts of things in your career, you can borrow a few ideas off of somebody else's profile. Now, the next thing we're going to do is go into privacy and settings. And there's quite a few things that we need to check here. So the first one is email addresses. Now, one of the interesting things about living a globally mobile life is that you accumulate email addresses. Every time you have a new job, you end up with a new email address or even a new business. And you can see here, I've got loads of email addresses, 17 of them on my account. And the reason I add them all to my account is so that if anybody tries to find me via one of those email addresses, it will link to this LinkedIn profile. And even if those email addresses were no longer valid, I would still leave them on my account, particularly if you've been with a company for a lot of years. There was one lady I worked with, she'd been in an Australian bank for 25 years, and she removed her email address from her LinkedIn account the weekend before I saw her, which was really frustrating because she will lose access to a lot of connection requests from past colleagues and collaborators by taking it off, because people won't necessarily be able to find her via her email address. So I really encourage you to add emails on and not take them off. But that said, if you've got employees and they were in a sales role, you definitely want to make sure before they leave the building that they remove your work email address off of their LinkedIn profile so they don't keep attracting sales from their job with you. So that's the time when you would remove it, but you know, for your personal benefit, keep them all on your account. Now, this is also the screen where you can add in your phone number. And if you are concerned about your personal privacy, I really do recommend that you do not put your phone number in this box, because anybody you're connected to will actually be able to see it. But also if somebody syncs their phone with LinkedIn, then those people might be able to reach out to you as well. So just be aware of that. I don't worry because I'm, run networks and my mobile phone number's all over the internet. But for other people, again, particularly in senior level roles, you might not want to do that. You can also actually mention here, or you can sign out of any sessions where you've logged in and accidentally forgot to sign out. But this is where we also go to get an archive of your data. And what you will need to do is click the fast file plus other data and request it and put your password in. And then within a few days, you'll receive an email from LinkedIn with a clickable link in it. And you have to go into that link and download your files. And in there will be a CSV file that you can open in Excel, and that will give a list of all of the people you're connected to, their first name, their last name, their email address, their current job title, their current company, and the date you connected with that person. And that can be a really great marketing tool if you're a coach or a consultant or something like that. You can print out your list every so often, add it to your own customer relationship management CRM system, use it as a prospecting list. If you follow the right spam laws, perhaps add it to the mailing list of your business and so on. So really helpful to do that. And I would suggest you would want to do that at least every 6 months. Again, in the unlikely event that LinkedIn crashes, you don't want to lose access to that information. Obviously, when you download that file, you'll also be able to say, well, on that date, I had that many connections. So there's another statistic there for you as well. There's various other things that you can do in there, which I won't go through today, but I'm just going to focus on the most essential ones. Now, this one here, who can see your connections? Now, again, always related to purpose. And I want people to know who I'm connected to and check me out via their connections and whatever. So I've chosen that as your connections. But if I was in a sales role, I would probably change it to only you. Now, what that means is that if I'm connected to Kate and Kate's connected to Judy, I will see that Kate is connected to Judy, and Kate's chosen only you, but I won't see who else Kate is connected to. So it will show shared connections, but not all the others. Whereas if it's your connections, and Kate had it as your connections, I'd see everybody that Kate was connected to. So you can make a choice on that one. But this is the one I encourage every single person I know to change to no. And the only time I encourage you to change it to yes is when late at night you turn it on briefly and you go and visit your own profile and you actually find out who else people are looking at who might be in competition with you. And then you go back and turn it off straight away so nobody else can see it. So that's the only time I actually recommend you turn that one on. But the default is on. So if you don't go in here and change it, people will be able to see that. Whilst we're doing lots of changes to your LinkedIn profile, I also suggest you turn no onto sharing edits. And this, I told you about reverse stalking. Well, this is where you can go stalking. So on the free account, I have to leave myself turned on. And most of the time, that's exactly what I do. But if I was chasing up a bad date or I was being interviewed by somebody tomorrow and I didn't want them to know that I was looking at their profile, I could make myself anonymous, then go and look at their profile, come back and turn myself back on. Now, the middle option is a waste of time, but this is quite a handy tool. But please remember that if you look at someone's profile, there's actually a 30% chance they'll look back at you. So it's actually a really good cold call prospecting technique without picking up a telephone. So there was somebody I knew who actually just kept looking at this company's executive team on a regular basis so frequently that they ended up contacting him one day and saying, would you like to work for us? And he said, of course, yes, please. So, you can't obviously use it to an abusive point of view, but as one of the techniques you might like to use on LinkedIn to find opportunities, if you look at people's profiles, as I said, there's a 30% chance they'll look back at you. Cold calling has a statistic of about 5%. So anyway, I leave mine turned on, as you can see there. And the rest of the settings you can see I leave fairly consistent. I'm not going to worry about communications today, but shortly I'll pause and ask if there's any questions related to that, and I'll come back to Kate. But there's another couple of things that I want to quickly show you whilst we're in here in LinkedIn. And this one is related to your actual statistics. So again, you can see that you've got those number of views per 90 days. But if you look at your own profile, you will see where your number of followers is on this section here. So 11,834 as at today for me. But my number of connections was back here under settings and privacy, it says 11,404 connections. So you can see slightly more people are following me than are actually connected to me. So they're, you know, those statistics that I'd want to keep in my spreadsheet so that I can go back and look at them in real time. Also, if I look at my network, I can also see the number of connections I have over here. And if you want to invite some people you know to connect with you on LinkedIn, you can choose more options, and you can invite them via email, and by separating them with commas, you can do some group ones, but you can only do about 10 requests at a time and about 100 a day if you do it that way. And please don't spam people. LinkedIn is not the platform for spamming. And if you want to use it as your main lead generation tool and just annoy people, that behavior will be detected very quickly, and you really run the risk of losing your whole profile. And there's a number of people I've met who've had their profiles deleted by LinkedIn. So just bear that in mind. What I do not recommend in this area is to connect your email accounts or anything like that with LinkedIn, because it's called syncing, and it takes ownership of your data, and I really don't want you to get caught out with, you know, sharing information with LinkedIn that, you know, really is private. But if you're just sending an invitation via email to people you know, then that's definitely one way to do it. So Kate, any questions that you think would be relevant for people to ask at this point?
Yes, there are many questions, and I have been taking copious notes during your presentation. It's been so helpful. You know, there's so many things to learn about LinkedIn, and these things that you've been sharing, even to some of these really small little things, you think, oh, I didn't even know that was an option in LinkedIn. So very, very helpful.
Great.
So there are a few questions. Now, I think, you know, we all get a lot of invitations, and I know that I've gotten invitations from people who I do not know. And usually when I look and see, okay, they're in my field, or, you know, they're connected to several people I know, then I'll connect with them. But I'm wondering, do you recommend that we just connect with whoever wants to connect with us, or are there people who you recommend we do not connect with?
Well, firstly, yes, there are people I recommend you do not connect with. They're normally from some obscure country. They've got 3 connections and, you know, a very suspicious looking LinkedIn profile, sometimes without even a photograph of them. So, you know, there's a certain criteria that I use when I look at somebody's invitation request. And I'm sorry I can't show you one right now, because normally I have one in my network box. But all right, well, maybe what I should do is I should have a look at yours and decide, would I connect with Kate? Are you happy for me to do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
And this one's you on the top?
Let me see. Yes.
Great. Okay. So the fact that you don't have a photograph would probably make me think,
I do. That's strange. I do have a photograph.
Okay, so it could be because you're a second level connection that I'm not seeing it. So that's okay. Then I would look at your headline and say, does this look, you know, genuine or suspicious? Then I look at your number of connections, and then I look at how complete your profile is. So you've been reasonably active, which is a good sign. And you've also filled in your jobs, you know, and they look relatively detailed, and it looks reasonably genuine. You've got formal qualifications and so on. So I would say yes. But if I suspected that you were going to spam me with, you know, amazing offers to redesign my website, or that you were just going to use my connections to spam them, then I would say no. So even though I like having more people in my network, I wouldn't necessarily connect with everybody. So yeah, and there's some of the criteria that I use to assess whether or not I would go forward.
Yeah, those are great guidelines. I don't connect with somebody if they're not connected to anyone that I know.
Yeah. So you will see also we've got 16 mutual connections, and I know some of those people, and they're very much in that space. So yes, I would definitely consider you as being, you know, a worthwhile connection for my purpose. But everybody is unique. And so, for instance, if you were a freelancer digital marketing expert, you might want to be connected with, you know, some of those people who offer various agency services.
So I'm actually really interested now in the fact that my photo and then also the image behind my photo that I uploaded is not showing up in your profile. Does that mean that people, anyone coming to my profile who I'm not already connected to will see that?
It's a really good question. And some of the time we can predict these things and some of the time we cannot. But what I would like to suggest that you do is if you go into this box on the right-hand side of your profile, which says edit your public profile, further down, you can describe which things that you would like to have visible to people. And you can see that I've ticked all of the boxes of all of the sections that I've completed and made it public. Now, say for instance, you're an expat leading a very major company and there's been some terrible disaster that has occurred and the journalists are all after your, you know, details so that they can blast you. In a crisis situation, you might want to say, make my profile visible to no one, you know, until the crisis has faded a little. So don't ever delete your profile, but you can make it visible to no one. But I've obviously ticked all of those boxes and I'm not sure what your setting is, but that would be, you know, one of the things I'd check. The other thing you need to remember is, like all social media, the goalposts change on a very frequent basis. So what I might say to you in this webinar, you know, in 3 weeks' time, somebody could go to that screen and it just doesn't exist. So, you know, this is the amazing variable. And that's why I try and focus when I talk about LinkedIn on what I call the principles of LinkedIn, so that you understand as a user, there must be an option somewhere to change my visibility or to get my statistics or to, you know, attract the best opportunities. So it might not be in exactly the same way that I suggest today, but the concept of what I'm teaching you will in theory be the same regardless of how the platform changes.
Yeah, and I think the key here is definitely to check what your profile looks like, not just to you, but to other people who will be viewing it. And I'm gonna have to look into this more because it says that it's public. So now I'm really curious why it's not showing up. So I'm gonna have to look into that.
Yeah, and as I said, it could also be that because you're a second level connection and I'm on the free account, it might not show me that information. And it could be a new parameter that they've put in the algorithms. So you might not be able to do anything about it. But say, for instance, I go to another browser and I just Google you where I'm not signed in. It'll be interesting to see what I see at LinkedIn off of Google. Ta-da! There you are.
Okay. Oh, good.
So yeah, all
good.
So that's what I mean. You know, it's a variable, and obviously, you know, these big companies are designed to sort of encourage people to pay. So it could have something to do with that as well.
Well, that's another reason why you want to have the full profile filled out, so that if your photo doesn't show up, you still look like, you know, that you need to be on there and that you're a real person.
Absolutely. And what you'll notice on my LinkedIn profile is that obviously I've written articles, but at the bottom of my summary, I'll just go back to LinkedIn, you'll see that I've got videos of me talking about my books, so people can see my image there as well. So, and apparently males in particular love video, so, you know, having some video on your profile can also be helpful too.
That's a great idea. Yeah. So there's another question. You were mentioning that when you view other people's profiles, they can see that you have viewed their profile, but you have the choice to either be anonymous or there will be some identifying information listed, but not your name, or all of your information can be listed. How do you recommend somebody decide what level of anonymity they want when they're looking at other people's profiles?
Well, I think you should make the decision to you want to be anonymous or not anonymous, and that's it. So, you know, that middle option in my mind is a complete waste of time. So either be anonymous or, you know, reveal all. I don't think the partly visible something, you know, is that helpful either way. And don't also be anxious. I mean, with the premium account, you can make yourself anonymous all the time and still see the last 90 days of people who've looked at you. And if you've got the premium account, you still will not be able to see the details of somebody who's looked at you anonymously. So if somebody else wants to be anonymous when they look at your profile, you can't stop them from doing that. But yeah, don't worry about the half anonymous. Just either be anonymous or not anonymous, and that's the simplest thing to do.
Is there a benefit to not being anonymous?
Well, I think there is, because there's that chance that people will say, wow, Sue's looked at me, there must be a reason. And I can show you what has happened with one of my connections recently. And what had happened was, this lady, I always like to acknowledge people who like, comment or share my content. And what this lady noticed was that I had looked at her profile. So she reached out to me, and I've just got to see if I can find her now. I think her name was Sandy. And anyway, what she did was she messaged me and said, oh, hi, Sue, I noticed you've looked at my profile. You know, and then she started on a sales pitch. So I thought, well, that's interesting, isn't it? You know, so then I had to explain. I can't find her details at the moment. I won't worry about that for now. But anyway, she looked at my profile. Well, she saw that I'd looked at her profile. Then she messaged me. She said, you know, I noticed you checked out my profile. I said, well, the reason I did was because I wanted to say thank you for sharing my content. Oh, well, this is what I'm up to, you know, can we catch up? And I don't do coffee meetings anymore. I literally do not have the time for it. And I find that coffee meetings, it doesn't mean you have to drink coffee, it just means you have a meeting. That the person just picks your brains for an hour. You lose all that time traveling, all the time back, and you know, you don't normally get any business out of it. And this is a particular technique I use now, and I say, look, I run events, and if you'd like to catch up, would love to see you at one of these events, and they're free. So, you know, there's no cost to them to attend. Then they get to meet not only me, but everybody else who's at the event. And, you know, they're friendly events. And believe it or not, that I don't think anybody has ever turned up at one of those events free of charge. So then I really know that the only thing they wanted to do was get free information. And so I've saved myself an enormous amount of time by not agreeing to that. But anyway, I digress.
Well, you know, I was going to say, I just looked at who's viewed my profile, and you pop up there, and it says that I can easily connect with you. So that seems like a really good benefit. So, you know, I don't now have to go somewhere else and try to figure out how to connect with you. All I have to do is just click connect, which I just did. And it's an easy way for people to connect with you. So I think that's a big bonus, big benefit.
It's a huge benefit. Yeah, absolutely. And that'll quite often happen. And also, as I said, there's that 30% chance that people will actually look at who's looked at you. I mean, that's my favorite thing to do on LinkedIn is reverse stalk. And if I see, oh my goodness, all these people who are part of FIGT have looked at my profile, wow, you know, the webinar must have been helpful to them. So yes, it's a terrific way to do things. You can also go in here and see who you've sent invitations to. So I obviously have done that with people who've come to my events. So I invite them after they've been to my events to connect with me. So it invites them. Now, a lot of those people don't necessarily choose to connect with me. And I don't worry about that because, you know, either they're not checking out LinkedIn or they've got too many invitations waiting for them, or it could be any number of reasons. But quite often, as a result of running an event and connecting with people on LinkedIn, I just pop up in their news feed every so often, and that reminds them that I exist without me nagging them. So it's like a cold, you know, referral system just working away all on its own without me doing anything. So that means that because I live a very modest lifestyle, I have enough clients just, you know, ringing and calling and messaging me on a regular basis because there's a enough of a digital asset out there with enough information going out regularly that people see it and remember and refer, and yeah, it keeps happening.
I love how that can be so automatic. I mean, you were saying that, I think you said that you recommend, like maybe 20 minutes a week on LinkedIn, which seems incredibly manageable. And I can see how that would, once you put some initial time into it, and if you set all these things up the way that you were talking about, I could definitely see, 20 minutes a week or 5 minutes every couple of days or something, and you can absolutely keep up with your LinkedIn profile. That sounds so manageable.
Well, it's designed to be, because the reality is, if you're spending a lot of time on social media, you're not in your business or you're not on your job. And that's not a good thing. I mean, social media is a really scary vortex, and it's so seductive, and you don't even realize, you start on it and then half an hour later or an hour later you stop. I mean, it's sort of like addictive almost, and they design it in such a way that it's so engaging. So, if you put your stopwatch on it, it works. And the other thing too to bear in mind, as you can imagine, I've got 11,000 connections. So if I was posting 6 times a day, as some people suggest you should on Twitter, I mean, people would think I was a megalomaniac, and that what was I actually doing? Do I ever work? So I don't want to be seen as too visible, because that doesn't look good for me either. So as a general rule, I try and like, comment or share something each day, just one thing, that I've looked at and checked. I try and write an article once a month, and then all I do is just respond to everything else that happens. And that's it.
Yeah, that's a great strategy.
Yeah, and my reverse stalking, of course. I mean, I'm completely hooked on that.
I love that. I love that you call it reverse stalking. That just kind of makes it sound more fun than get on LinkedIn and do work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also makes it memorable, because I've been teaching for such a long time. I try and attach what I teach to what people would already know. So it just makes it easier to remember.
Okay, so we have another question here. So, a lot of people have multiple jobs and businesses, and they do lots of different things. You might be a freelance writer and a teacher and a consultant, and have a couple of side gigs. But it always seems like LinkedIn really wants you to focus on one thing, and it can be difficult to summarize or highlight all of these different things in your profile. How do you recommend somebody who has those multiple components of their career communicate that effectively in LinkedIn?
Well, it's a really good question, Kate, because I was through everything and not getting any gigs. And then when I decided I would just, focus on LinkedIn, that's when I started getting gigs. So you really have to look at the different types of gigs you've got and what type of gigs you want to attract on LinkedIn. So the ones I want to attract on LinkedIn are LinkedIn gigs. Now, this has not stopped me getting requests to write, to appear on podcasts, to teach, and do all the other things that I do. So if anybody's got multiple careers, it is me. So, you can see in my headline, I've put my highest priority one first, which is LinkedIn. But then if we go down and we look at my current roles, so this is a current role, my own website and consulting services. Then you've got my Newcomers Network, started in 2001. And then you've got this other network that I set up, Global Mobility Network, which that's a project for next year. Long story, I won't go into that now. Then there's the Camberwell Network that I started in 2012, then my books, and then you have to click see more, and we're still talking about all the things I do right now. So if we click see more positions, you'll then see that I'm a consultant for NetExpat, and that I also teach at the CAE. So you can see here, I've got all of my jobs. But what I've decided is my main goal with LinkedIn is to attract the LinkedIn gigs, because they're what people seem to find of most value. And when I look at my overall skill sets, that's the particular area that I think I can add most value to people, and I can charge accordingly for that. So yeah, so I've got loads of experience working with individuals, with organisations. Even when I teach, I bring all these examples back into my teaching. But obviously, I'm promoting the educational facility at the same time here, but I don't want that to be my main goal from LinkedIn. So people just need to think about that. But secondly, there's another little spot that people can fill in, and that's the jobs tab up here on the top. And I encourage everybody, even if you're in business, to update your career interests. And this is particularly important for expats. And what you can see I've done is I'm not a fabulous traveller. I'll admit that right now. I mean, I love Melbourne. It's classified as the world's most livable city. You know, there's heaps of things you can do. I even like the weather. But I'm quite happy to come up in search results for other cities within Australia. So I've added those locations in there. And then when you see what job titles I'm considering, you can see those. There's a notice to recruiters here. I'm only interested in contract, part-time, freelance consulting gigs for short periods of time. I'm based in Melbourne, willing to travel around Australia internationally if travel, accommodation and speaking fees are included, because I quite often get invited to some, you know, crazy far out conference in the middle of outer Mongolia for free, you know, and I've got to pay to get there and pay to attend the conference. Well, that's just not realistic, particularly when you're traveling from Australia. So, and then what types of jobs are you interested in? You can mention that there. And then you can say what type of industries and what size company. Now, it's not going to guarantee that the jobs are going to come rushing into you, but at least it's a way of telling the database that they're the sorts of things you're interested in.
That's excellent. You know, I'm not sure I've ever really looked at that jobs tab. I'm going to have to take a look at that.
I know,
Yeah.
and I really only focus on what works, you know, and that's one. I'm really excited about that one. Another thing I'd also like to just briefly mention to expats before we go back to the slides is that if you know you're going to be moving to Austria, you can actually change your location to Austria before you even get there. So then that way you come up in Austrian search results before you even arrive. So really think about that. Now, what you can then do is in your address box, you can actually say, look, I'm currently based in, you know, Toronto, wherever you are. So there's an address box here somewhere, should be. Oh no, they've moved it again. It's back over in this other one, contact and personal info. So here you can see my address is here. So you could say currently living in Toronto, but moving to Austria end of September or something, you know. So you're not lying, but you're then making yourself available for opportunities in that new location before you even get there.
And I think your comment, your recommendation about really thinking about what your goal is for LinkedIn, because that's so important, because it's not just putting down everything that you've ever done in your professional life. It's really thinking about what you want to achieve by being on LinkedIn, whether that's finding a job or finding clients, or because those are two very different goals, and having that as your number one thing in mind when you're creating your profile or updating it. That's such a good recommendation.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting, and I constantly change mine. I mean, what you see today and what you see in a month could be quite different. And one of the things that I changed recently is, you know, unlike a lot of people who are out here on our own doing things on our own, you feel a little bit silly about waving a flag and saying this is what you do. So what I did was, instead of putting a priority on my own websites, what I did was I moved up where I'm teaching at the fancy universities and so on, but I wasn't getting any leads, you know, and I think people were actually intimidated by that. So then I went back to the sort of the story about, you know, shuffling, because you can move these jobs, you know, with this little hamburger here, and you can move ones, you know, higher up or lower down. And so I've moved them around to sort of really think about, well, if somebody is interested in hiring me, what information would be of most use to them? And then I thought, well, those stories are actually much better than the fact that I teach at some fancy universities. So yeah, and I've got more work. So it definitely works.
It's a great idea. So we've done some Q&A, and this webinar is a little bit longer than some of our other ones because, Sue, you have so much incredibly valuable information to share. So we just wanted to mention to everybody that Sue's going to go back to PowerPoint. She's going to share more content, but if you want to take a break, this is a good place to pause the video for a minute. And yeah, Sue, I'm going to hand it back to you to continue on with this fabulous content.
Great, thank you, Kate. And I love it when I provide value, but what I get even more excited about is when I hear that people have made changes and what's happened. So, you know, if anybody wants to share, oh, I did this and this is what happened, I get super excited by that. So, you know, really encourage you not just to listen to this webinar, which is, you know, being provided by Families in Global Transition. It's actually about taking some action, updating your LinkedIn profile, having the courage to give a few of these things a go. Only if it feels right for you, but you know, even if it feels just a little bit uncomfortable, if it's just a little bit of a stretch, you know, and you're not sure, I say go for it. You know, trust your instincts. Most of us have got lots of experience and can rely on that to be a little more courageous. Okay, so one of the things that I showed when we were back in LinkedIn, and I forgot to mention this, I will just quickly go back for 2 seconds, is that from your homepage, your own LinkedIn profile, on the top right-hand side, it says edit your public profile. And one thing that everybody absolutely must do is change their LinkedIn URL. Now my internet's just gone a bit funny there. I'll do it again. And when you change your LinkedIn URL to your own name, it search engine optimizes your name on Google. So you can see that I've changed mine to Sue Elson, all one word, lowercase, and that's it. Now, I don't want to change that. If your name is not available, try putting a little dash in there instead. If that's not available, and you're a doctor, you know, you might want to put doctor and your name after it, or you might want to put a number at the end, but please don't have it to be anything to do with your date of birth because that's part of your identity. But really encourage you to update your LinkedIn URL and make sure that you then include that on your mobile phone signature, your email signature, and so on and so forth, so that people can find you. And that means that when people Google your name, your LinkedIn profile is likely to come up rather than people with the name Kate Brubaker, you know, so on. So definitely worth doing that. Okay, so back to the slides. The next thing that I'd like to discuss is make sure your photos aligned with your purpose and have a background image that matches as well. If you're not sure, just put a nice color in there, but don't make the background image so interesting that people look at the background image rather than at your face. Really need to have an excellent headline under your name and make sure you've got all those keywords in there and you've selected your location. Fill out your summary section. The first 2 lines will be the most important. If you're not working at the moment or there's gaps in your profile, please say that you were traveling or you're on sabbatical. One of my clients suffered cancer. So the first question I asked was not what sort of cancer did you have? It was, what did you learn? And so that's what we talked about in that area of his LinkedIn profile. Because if a recruiter sees gaps, they think you were in jail on drugs, you know, in conflict with the law, whatever. So really good to say you were traveling, you were doing voluntary work, whatever, group those dates together. You can also include your own website in the website section and make sure that you choose other so that you can list the name of your website rather than just personal website or company website. And if you have a profile on a professional association's website, you can have 3 website links. So I really encourage you to put those in. The next, as I mentioned earlier, was focusing on your value and your achievements. So the reason people are employable is because they offer something that is of use to an enterprise or to a person or an organisation. So the comment I make is if you don't tell, you can't sell to either the database, the algorithms, or human beings. The value, what is it you can offer? How do you help? Not currently seeking opportunities. Please do not ever put that on there. Your keywords are much more valuable than those 3 words. Your achievements are anything over and above what you are required to do in your job. So you can include percentages, so it's not revealing how you saved $3 billion, you just saved 44% or something like that. You can use visual descriptions so people can imagine you in that job and it makes it more memorable. Real results, please, no grandiose statements. You know, particularly here in Australia, we're very black and white in some respects. And I think that if you just talk about numbers, it's a lot easier for people to understand of all backgrounds than if you say, as I said earlier, you were the best salesperson ever. Appropriate, focus on your eyes in your photographs. For women, not your cleavage. For men, not your hairy chest. There was one Irish guy who had a professional photograph done, and he was wearing an open neck shirt and his hairs were showing. So I said, you'll have to Photoshop those out. But, you know, you're here on LinkedIn to be seen as, you know, a person. And I really dislike anything that reveals any skin. So, and I'm not a prude in that respect. I just want people to look at you and your eyes and do business with your eyes, or opportunities with your eyes, you know, not with your body as such. Your value and achievements must also be aligned. So you can massage the message, but don't lie. So, you know, you don't have to say, I was at home looking after the kids. If you're a guy and you say that, you look like a hero. If you're a woman like that, you sound like somebody who likes to stay at home cooking muffins, which is definitely not, you know, how a professional woman wants to be seen. So, you know, you can say you're on a career break and, you know, completing further study, or doing some voluntary work in different locations. There's all sorts of other ways that you can say it so that you can focus on the objective you're trying to achieve. And as I said earlier, my voluntary work is some of the best experience I've had. You can also, as I said, group dates together. Now, if you're in your own business, you would also want to create a company profile, and that way you will actually have a logo appear next to your experience section when you fill out that on your LinkedIn profile. You can complete it by following that link. Remember to still include your keywords and use up as many characters as you can, because the more words that are in there, the more likely you're to be found. And make sure you've got good logos, a consistent description with all of your other profiles. The specialties, there's heaps of the specialties you can put in, so make sure you put all the skills you have when you started the cover image, and there's that link to another article. And make sure that if you've got staff, they're following your company profile and that they've updated their LinkedIn profiles to fit with your company brand. Also, a really good strategy if you want to work for particular organisations is to follow those company pages. There's a big bank here in Australia who actually targets people who are already following their LinkedIn company page because they have the LinkedIn Recruiter service. You can also follow industry and professional associations. Now, I understand with expats you can't afford to join every professional association every time you move countries, but quite often they have profiles on LinkedIn. So whilst you're in country, you can at least follow their profiles on LinkedIn. Maybe you want to follow leading suppliers, stakeholders, industry icons, influencers, you know, people who've got ideal clients or similar keywords so that you can be more likely to appear in search results. You can also connect with some local groups, so you can be involved in the local community, local business associations, chambers of commerce, expatriate groups and so on, as well as international bodies if you're globally mobile on a fairly regular basis. You can also join groups on LinkedIn. Now, a few years ago, groups were really fantastic, and I think LinkedIn is sort of half moving away from some of them now. And as I said, I showed you just recently, update your career interests. But if you're going to join a group and you think it's going to be worth your time, make sure it's well moderated, not just full of consultants selling their messages, and it has a reasonable level of activity and a reasonable number of members. And also think about whether that's the best use of your time, because if you're a coach and you're in a coaching group, it might be fantastic for your professional development, but you're not going to find coaching clients in a coaching group. So you need to think, well, would my time be better off interacting with potential clients in the news feed than it would be by participating in the coaching group? And as I said, update the career interests that I showed you before. You can also showcase, if you are a member of a professional association, I really do encourage you to be a member of at least one on your personal profile, and that link will show you how to do that. One of the roles I had was very much related to my professional experience, so I actually put that in my experience section whilst I was there. But a lot of organisations love reading about your voluntary experience, so please do not underestimate it. And if you weren't paid for a long time but you were part of an expat group, put it in your experience. Nobody needs to know that it was not actually part of your working career. All right, so that's about showcasing your professional associations. Make sure you follow that link there and you'll get more tips on how to do that. Also, if you're part of your own enterprise, you need to have a social media policy. Things that you might want to think about is what updates you want your staff to have on their profiles, what links you would like them to add, what companies you want them to follow, what groups you want them to join, whether they're going to actually be responsible for putting updates on your company pages. Are they going to like, comment and share either your content or the company content? What will be the policy on connections? If they connect to somebody in their job with you, they must also add that person to the enterprise database. And also what's going to happen when they leave the business. So as I said before, remove their work email address off of their LinkedIn profile, update their LinkedIn profile for the date they finished and so on. And obviously, if you're the leader of your business, don't just outsource everything and let somebody else take over your brand, because that's risky. You know, you need to be directing whatever goes out under your name. I also believe LinkedIn is an amazing research tool. So you can use it to reconnect with alumni from universities or employers that you've worked with, and you can connect and share content with them locally and international. You can find collaborators, suppliers. You can look at posts for some publishing ideas. You can look at what non-competing enterprises offer. So for instance, my sister has a luxury property halfway between the Gold Coast and Byron Bay in New South Wales on the east coast of Australia, absolute beachfront. And so that's a really lovely property, and it's not in competition with a villa in Tuscany. So, you know, we would find those sorts of enterprises internationally and join and connect. So you can quite often find those sorts of people or organisations if you do a bit of research on LinkedIn. And also, you know, if there's somebody you really want to connect with, start looking at what they're doing on LinkedIn and, you know, sharing their content or looking what other content they've written and sharing that. And, you know, FIGT has probably got loads of things from conferences and stuff that you could share with your network, and that will, you know, be great for the organisation as well. But remember, be strategic. It's not about how many people like it. It's not about your vanity. One of my clients, she put a picture of something on Facebook and everybody says, oh, you're getting older than you did 20 years ago. And she started putting all these pictures on Facebook. And I said, but that's not your job. You know, your job is your business. So please don't waste your time just chasing likes. It's a complete waste of time. Next is you need to search engine optimize everything. And that basically just means make sure your content can come up in search results, either within LinkedIn or within Google. So if you've got a really niche service, you can actually optimize your LinkedIn profile to such an extent. And I did this for one of my clients when I was working with him regularly. He was a media trainer. And so if you Googled media trainer Melbourne, then that Google search result would bring up his LinkedIn profile. So you can do it for your personal profile, you can do it for your company profile, you can do it with the articles that you write, and you can see my articles via that link. You can do it, you know, with your updates. Make sure you include your hashtags and other ways for people to find things, and make sure you also share your content on your website and other social media. My biggest favorite is Google+, because that's telling the Google search engine that you've just published something. And so I always share my content via Google+. And if you decide you're going to go down the advertising path, you absolutely must make sure that when people land on your website, they purchase, because otherwise you're just wasting a lot of money with advertising. Here in Australia, I haven't heard anybody get good results out of advertising on LinkedIn. That could just be the people I'm mixing with, but I just don't think there's enough people looking at the news feed here yet. That you might want to investigate and talk to other people who advertise and find out what their results are before you commit to a spend in that area. As I said earlier, collect your statistics for your employees, how many connections and views per 90 days they get before and after they update their profiles. Your own company, how many followers have you got? Your company updates, how often do they get likes, comments or shares? How many referrals are you getting? So look at your Google Analytics on your website and find out how many people are actually getting there via LinkedIn. Your recommendations and endorsements that you've got, particularly for your keywords, and your articles, your views, likes, comments, shares, appearance in Google and so on. Also, after a period of time, you might want to sit back and say, well, what's working and what's not? What's working best for your enterprise? What generates the most engagement? And I can tell you that photos with a person's face on them will generally attract more interest if they appear in the news feed. What goes most viral? Start thinking about video, because there's a prediction that by 2018, up to 2/3 of the content viewed online will be videos. Images, PDFs, add your LinkedIn URL to your email signature and your phone. And also another thing that I'm going to start teaching is about creating an online reviews strategy, because everybody will type in the name of you and the word reviews, and you want to make sure that what comes up, you know, reflects something about you. So in terms of stats, what should you aim for? Well, for your personal profile, I'd suggest 60 or more connections, 100 or more views per 90 days, 6 or more recommendations, and 20 endorsements for your top 10 skills. Make sure that 80% of all the sections are completed on your profile, but don't put in your date of birth, and unless you've got a patent, you can skip that one. Log in once a week, write 3 posts a year or articles that will actually feature on your profile. Check for new features every 6 months, back up and keep your stats every 3 months. And there's a few more quick wins if you'd like to follow that link. In terms of your company profile, if you have one, make sure all your employees are following, and that ultimately you get over 100 if you can try and get that. Do 1 or more updates per month and aim for more than 5 likes, comments and shares per update. So you might actually put out a little email message with a link to that post and say, hi everybody, can you all please like, comment and share, so that you can at least get 5 per update that you put on your company page. Keep all of your information, logos, keyword lists up to date. You would have probably had to do some sort of keywords for your own website. Follow up all comments and shares within 24 hours to say thank you and respond. Check for new features every 6 months and back up and keep your stats every 3 to 6 months. And there's more tips for your company profile there. So, as I said, action is what I'm all about. So I really encourage you to do some edits today. Look at other LinkedIn profiles for ideas and do more edits with a friend. Set a deadline for updating your profile. And if you're going to do it, don't try and do it all in one day, because it's, you know, quite tiring. But if you start with 10 minutes here and there, you'll probably get quite a lot done. I also have an accountability partner, and I catch up with her once a week, and that keeps me on track and planning for the following week as well. So you might want to do that, or find a mentor who can review your profile and give you some feedback. But remember, it's still your purpose, not theirs. So take, you know, listen to all of it, but choose what you do. Get maximum value by doing something straight away, and be courageous. Describe in dot points the truth, massage the message where necessary, and never lie. Remember, it's a pull marketing strategy. Now, just to give you a bit of an idea on how I help people, well, if you want stuff for free, I have plenty of it. Podcasts, presentations, publications are all available on my suewelson.com website. If you'd like to manage it yourself, there's digital books, there's 3, but the one most relevant to this session is obviously the LinkedIn one. You can get a paperback version posted anywhere in the world to you. And I'm in the process of writing an online course, which will hand guide you through all this stuff. And alternatively, if you want to book an appointment, we can do that via Skype or here in Melbourne. So, FIGT in a subject line. I'll send you a copy of these slides, and believe it or not, the full unedited version, you know, the whole lot of my 120 ways to achieve your purpose with LinkedIn. So that's 80,000 words on what you can do with LinkedIn. Chapter 11 is specifically for internationals. So more than happy to give that away, as FIGT is a charitable organisation. And of course, I'll invite you to connect on LinkedIn, no obligation to do so, but you'd be most welcome to be a part of my network. And if you've got quick questions, I'm happy to answer those via email too.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and conversation, Sue. It's been fantastic. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I look forward to welcoming everyone back for the next FIGT webinar. So thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you, Kate. It's been a pleasure.